السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله حق حمده والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد المبعوث بالنور وخير هديه سبحانه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه إلى يوم عرضه سبحانه وتعالى. Alhamdulillah, in our lessons on the Tariqa al-Muhammadiyya, in which we are looking at the way of attaining taqwa, of the way of attaining mindfulness. And we're looking at the heart of taqwa, which is the qualities of the heart. And we've been looking at the interrelatedness of the qualities of the blameworthy qualities of the heart. So we are looking, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, at anger and some of the things that stir anger. And these are all interrelated. Why? Because malice or envy, if intensified, becomes malice. Right? Envy, if it intensifies, it becomes malice. And malice is expressed through and stirred by anger. Right? And anger itself results in a whole number of other blameworthy traits, right? So the blameworthy traits are like roots, right, from which all kinds of qualities emerge. So he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam al-Birgivi, one of the greatest of the scholars during the Ottoman era, وَمِنْهُ الْخِيَانَةُ وَهُوَ الثَّانِي وَالْعِشْرُونَ. Right? And from the things that most intensely stir anger is khiyana, is deception. Right? That if you are deceived, you get angry. So there are two aspects, right? Here, Imam al-Birgivi, like others, is teaching us that be aware of what others do that could cause you to act in a wrongful manner. But also be wary lest you are party to another person committing the wrong. Right? So there's two components that we have to be careful about. That if you cheat another person, your cheating is sinful. If you deceive another person, khiyana is deception. You deceive another person, you have the sin of the deception. But when a person is deceived, it is not unreasonable to expect that they may be upset with you. And if they acted wrongfully, you are part of the reason they got upset. So you share in that sin as well to some extent. But then also, if you are cheated, right, or you are deceived, what do you have a right to do? What do you have a right to do? Does Zoom people can hear? What do they have a right to do? If someone is deceived or wronged, right? You have a right to seek your right. Right? But to the extent of being wronged. Right? So someone cheated you, say, no, give me back this thing. Cancel the transaction, etc. What's within your rights. But you don't have a right to transgress. Right? So there is a positive anger. Someone cheated you, you can be firm, say, excuse me, I got cheated. Can you please give me back full, the full amount that is due to me? That's your right. And that's positive anger. When you are moved to seek your right, that's a permissible positive anger. But then, if you And that's permitted for you. What is recommended for you is to overlook where you can. And we've discussed that previously. What you're not allowed to do is to follow a wrong of another with your wrongdoing. Right? So, khiyana, right? Khiyana, deception, is from the causes of deception is from the causes of anger. And it's the 22nd of the blameworthy traits of the heart. And deception is itself impermissible. Right? So anger is caused by deception, and deception itself is a blameworthy trait. Right? And deception is similar to cheating. Right? And it is also from the qualities of hypocrisy. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, Ayatul munafiqi thalath. Right? The signs of hypocrite are 3. Right? إِذَا حَدَّثَ كَذَبْ. When they speak, they lie. وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفْ. And when they promise, they break their promises. وَإِذَا تُمِنَ خَانْ. And when they are trusted, they betray their trust. And this happens frequently in transactions. Someone says, oh, this is a unique such and such. And it's a lie. Right? And that's deception. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, La imana liman la amanata lah. There is no faith in one who cannot be trusted. Now, khiyana, there's active deception. Right? Right? Khiyana is of 2 types, right? Right? Khiyana is, you can say it's bil fi'l. There's also bit tark. Right? Deception khiyana is deception or non-fulfillment of trust, right? So one way you deceive somebody is you gave your word, but you are lying, for example. You deceived them, right? But this is khiyana. By action. You actively deceived someone. You betrayed them because they're trusting you in what you say and do. So you see a fancy looking pen. I say, this is a very exclusive model pen. This. It's not. It's a $20 pen. It's a good quality pen, but it's not some exclusive thing. I sold it to you for $200. That's khiyana. But there's also khiyana, deception by omission. What is deception by omission? Deception by omission is when you are trusted and you don't fulfill the trust. So amanah and khiyana are interrelated. And there's a lot that's come. And khiyana is min usus al-dhulm. Right? Khiyana, deception, is from the foundations of wrongdoing. Just as amanah is asasul adl, is the amanah, being trustworthy, is the foundation of justice. Because in relationships, justice arises from being trustworthy. People trust you, you fulfill your trust. That is amanah. And that is justice. And that's why in relationships, you don't have to go fancy. Right? Right? They say there are 3 levels in relationships, right? Asasul adab and la tu'dhiya ahada. Right? The foundation of proper conduct is that you don't harm others. Right? Or even inconvenient. And that is it. You don't inconvenience others. Don't hurt others. Higher than that is ada'ul haqq. Just fulfill the rights of people. Know who has a right and give them what is rightfully theirs. Don't go fancy, go right. Beyond that is then أن تحسن إليه, to do good to them. And that has maratib, that has degrees. تحسن إليه بالمعروف بالإحسان, to do good to them with what is good or with excellence, which is much higher. But aiming for excellence, I give them gifts, I do this, I do that, but the fundamental rights you don't fulfill, right? That's like showing up, with a kufi on but no pants on, right? It's shameful. That's why he says وَضِدُّهُ, right? The opposite of khiyana, of deception, is amanah. وهو الأمانة واجب. The opposite of deception is being trustworthy or fulfilling trusts, and that is obligatory. رواه الإمام أحمد والطبراني في الأوسط وابن حبان عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه خادم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال: قلما خطبنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا قال: لا إيمان لمن لا أمانة له. So Sayyidina Anas said that rarely did the Prophet ﷺ address us. And khutbah here is not referring to the Friday sermon, but he did not, rarely did he address us, except that he said, right? So some of the copies, it says illa qal, right? Right? Except that he said, La imana liman la amanata la. There's no faith in one who cannot be trusted. Meaning there is no complete faith in one who cannot be trusted. Right? 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 وَلَا دِينَ لِمَنْ لَا عَهْدَ لَهُ. And there's no religion in one who does not fulfill their commitments. Right? Right? And there is a beautiful quote in the commentary from Al-Hakim, which is Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi. Right? Right? Here, for those of you who are following with the commentary, La imana liman la aman. There's no faith in one who cannot be trusted. Because the believer, what are the key qualities of the believer? Right? Ad-dinun nasiha. Religion is sincere concern for the good of others. That's religion. Al-Muslimu man salima al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. A Muslim is one whom others are safe from their tongue, from the harm of their speech, and their hand, from the harm of their actions. So they can trust them in their speech, and they can trust them with respect to their actions. لا يؤمن أحدكم. None of you believes. حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you believes until they wish for others of the good that they wish for themselves. And in some narration, لا يحب أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه من الخير ما يحبه لنفسه. None of you believes until they wish for others of the good that they wish for themselves. Also, it has come from our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, كل المسلم على المسلم حرام. Everything of a believer is impermissible with respect to another believer. دمه وماله وعرضه. Their life, meaning and limb, their property, and their honor, right, etc. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-majalisu bil-amana. Gatherings are a trust. So everything that happens in a gathering, conversation, words spoken, consultations given, these are all trusts. the threads of human interactions are of trust. When trust is broken, relationships break. Right? And there's a lot to say about that, but and that's why the commentators explain this quite extensively. And then he says, وَتَجْرِي الْأَمَانَةُ وَالْخِيَانَةُ فِي الْقَوْلِ أَيْضًا. Right? Trustworthiness and deception, trust and deception apply in one's words as well. So trust has to do with actions, and that would include things like contracts, commitments, and so on. And it applies to words as well. And the evidence of that is ما رواه أبو داود عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المستشار مؤتمن. Our beloved Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said, the one consulted has been trusted. And this is from the Jawami' al-Kalim of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. The one consulted has been trusted. So if you don't know about something in a manner that's worthy of trusting, don't say anything about it. Someone says, what do you have to say about so-and-so's sister? Should I marry her? So you say, well, if we consider how he is, no, you shouldn't marry her. Maybe he is a loser, but maybe his sister isn't, right? So you may end up saying something that is harmful to the other person, right? So if you don't know, someone says, do you recommend such and such matter? And in worldly matters, it's small, all right? It's a small deal. But still it's significant, right? So taqwa entails that if you're consulted, you see that as an amanah, it's a burden. You'll be asked about how you respond. Even in worldly things. Someone's considering to buy a particular laptop. And it's a cheap old laptop, but you don't know their circumstances. You don't know they're not that well off. So you say, you know what? I like MacBook Pros, especially the 16-inch. So the poor guy trusts you because you're older than them. They're impressed. You're a student of knowledge, whatever. They respect you. So they end up spending $3,000 when in their case, a $300 machine would have been more than sufficient for them. And you cause them harm. Maybe that would have been the mahar. 2 months later, they go to propose to Zubaydah, and uncle says, $2,000 mahar. So I don't have $2,000. Say, go away. Don't talk to me again. Okay? Now, we're only morally responsible for the direct implications of our words, but the indirect implications, we have to be aware that, there is some culpability as well. So be careful. If you don't know about the matter, are you trustworthy about what you're being consulted about? Can you give advice that can be trusted given the person's background? If you don't know their background, why are you advising them? But also the one consulted has been trusted, that the default is that if you're consulted, consultations are by default private. If you struggle with maintaining privacy, don't advise. You still got a loose tongue. Tighten your tongue before you consult, you advise, because that's deception. You're letting the other party down. Right? Right? So consultation is a sunnah. But if asked, don't be hasty. And one of the ways is to point to someone more experienced. And that's a sign that you consider, okay, who could give them the best advice? And it's not from being a slacker, right? Because you don't know about everything. Someone asks you, what's a good mind mapping solution? You don't know for sure. You've been using the same thing for 10 years. You got it 10 years ago. Sometimes we make default choices and someone gets harmed. They're broke. People, the pandemic's tough on a lot of people. So you got this solution. You got a legacy version. Now it's $70 a month because it's gone enterprise model. The poor guy's paying $70 a month because you recommended something. Whereas there's now lots of free solutions. You're not sure, point them to something sure. Say, let me get back to you. If you really want to be advised, consider and take it very seriously. Yeah, when you're advising, which is why Imam, the commentator, Imam al-Khadimi, right? He has a tanbih. He says, قال بعض الكاملين, says some of the perfected ones, people of deep knowledge, said that the one advising or the one counseling needs, and likewise the one al-mushir, the mushir here means al-mushir, the one giving advice, needs great knowledge, إلى علم كبير, vast, wide knowledge. فإنه يحتاج إلى علم الشريعة, because one needs knowledge of the religion, right? وهو العلم العام, right? And one also needs general knowledge of the states of people and the time and the place, right? And knowledge of how to weigh between considerations for people, right? So you choose, when you advise, what is best for them because they're trusting you, right? And there's a lot of things. So you need an awareness. Not everything is right for everybody, right? So someone asks you, what is the best fast? What is the best fast? Anybody? What's the best kind of fasting? And you're welcome to post in the channels. What's the best kind of fasting? Okay. Well, what's the obligatory fast? Yeah, but of the supererogatory fasting, right? But someone comes, asks you for advice, right? And sometimes advice is not, people don't come with banners. I am hereby seeking advice, giving my situation. So they come to you, O talib ilm, right? Or, O religious Muslims, what's the best kind of fasting? And people don't know sophistication. They're not saying, telling you, what's the best fasting for me? But you have to be careful. Are they asking you to teach them about the levels of fast? But often they're asking for advice. What's the best fasting for me? Right? So in itself, yes, the Prophet ﷺ said that the best fast is the fast of Dawood alayhi salam, who fasted a day and didn't fast a day. But if someone only fasts Ramadan, is that the best fast for them? Is that the best fast for them? Not really, right? So advice is not theory shared, right? Advice is, the knowledge has to be sound in itself, but then you have to know how to apply it to the person, and they may not be able to do so, right? They may not be able to do so. And if someone only fasts the fard and they say, should I fast the fast of Dawood alayhi salam? What's the answer? And the ulama would say, no. Said, make the intention to do so, but build gradually, because that's the sunnah. The sunnah is alaykum min al-amali ma tutiqun. Take from actions what you can manage. Right? So there's a way, there's a sunnah of advising, which you من يعلم الناس صغار العلم قبل كباره. The sunnah is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, كونوا ربانيين, be lordly people. Right? And a lordly person is the one who nurtures people gradually in cultivating their relationship with Allah. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ taught. The desert Arab came. Did he tell him to do what Sayyidina Abu Bakr was doing? No. He said, if I don't do anything beyond these things, will I enter paradise? And the Prophet said, yes. And he swore, I swear I won't do anything more. The Prophet said, أفلح in sadaq. He'll succeed if he is true. And that was an adult. But there's children of the senior Sahaba who the Prophet ﷺ said, right? Leave all, like his grandson, Sayyidina al-Hasan, he told him, دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك. Leave all that would make you doubt for all that does not make you doubt. Right? It's different advice. You have to consider. So there's the knowledge, but okay, what do I give the person? Right? They say, ضع الدواء في موضع الداء. ضع الدواء, place the medicine where the ailment is. Too little medication may not help. Overdose kills people. That's, of course, most critical in religious advice. But it's also important in worldly advice because they trust you. So what does it say next? وَمَنْ أَفْتَى. Right? So this is very, very critical, right? So, and this is particularly dangerous with people who learn a little bit, right? They say, قَلِيلُ عِلْمٍ أَضَرُّ مِنْ كَثِيرِ جَهَلٍ. A little bit of knowledge is more harmful than a lot of ignorance. Someone wants to learn, and the basic thing is, the sunnah is to be gradual in religious matters. Begin with the fard, right? Let that settle down. Then tell them about the wajib, then about the sunnah, step by step. Yassiru wa la tu'assiru. Facilitate and do not make things difficult. Bashiru, encourage. Wa la tunaffiru. Do not cause people to turn away. But even in worldly matters, know that what you say has implications. And so a little bit of knowledge can be more harmful than a lot of ignorance. So he says, وَمَنْ أَفْتَى بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Right? And someone who gives a religious answer. Right? A fatwa is جواب عن سؤال ديني, who gives an answer on a religious matter without the requisite knowledge. كان إثمه على من أفتاه. Right? Their sin is upon the one who gave them that answer. Right? Right? Because let's say someone trusts you. وَمَنْ أُفْتِيَ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. So it's مَنْ أُفْتِيَ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Someone who's given a religious answer by one who doesn't know. Right? So you're dressed up. Some people, everybody likes to broadcast and comment on religious matters, and they say wacky things, right? So someone believed you, right? You're dressed up like a religious person, and you speak. Now, they may have a shortcoming. The person seeking guidance needs to make sure that the person who's giving religious knowledge or guidance is two basic qualities, right? That are obligatory to find out first, which are they reliable in their knowledge, and are they upright in their conduct? I need to verify that with adab or through confirmation. The sign of them being reliable in their knowledge is that they studied what they're teaching with reliable, upright teachers. That reliable, upright teachers approve of their teaching. And they're upright. They're upright. And it's recommended that they be people of good character, etc. Right? So whoever is given an answer from someone without knowledge, the sin is upon the person who gave the wrong answer. So be careful of what you say about the religion. Right? Right? So if you're asked, and sometimes people out of embarrassment say, okay, so what do you feel is a stronger opinion about moon sighting? Firstly, religion is not about feelings, right? What do you say? Nothing. Say, consult the people of knowledge. If you have something to say, share what the people of knowledge have to say. Or even better, assist them in spreading sound knowledge. Right? And also be careful in this sense of all kinds of advice online, right? There's people who sit online talking about marriage and counseling and this and religious advice. And sometimes one is tempted to say, we should really say something about this person, because the person is a living disaster in their own conduct, in their practice, in this and this and this. And they're not even trying to deal with their own issues. That's why they're talking to the whole world. Right? So be careful. Right? And just because people gather around somebody doesn't mean anything. Right? So be very, very careful. Right? And be careful of that kind of ignorant self-validation. People just think you're all that, so they, that's what classically they used to refer to such people as mimman aqamahu zaman. Right? They're people whom time has propped up. Right? They're just propped up by time. Right? But they say such interesting things. But who said? Like, there's a lot of people talking out there, right? In the marketplace of religious guidance, there's a lot of religious guidance. Take religious guidance that is trustworthy. Right? Take religious guidance that is trustworthy. Right? That is the key. Right? Okay. And then he says, وَمَنْ أَشَارَ عَلَى أَخِيهِ بِأَمْرٍ يَعْلَمُ أَنَّ الرُّشْدَ فِي غَيْرِهِ فَقَدْ خَانَهُ. And whoever points to their brother with a matter that they know that the good is in other than it, has deceived them. Right? This is a completion of the hadith, right? That the one consulted has been trusted, and the one who is given an answer, one who's given an answer without knowledge, the sin is upon the one who said it. Because someone goes to the Imam of the masjid. Does the common person know? Is the Imam of the masjid a faqih, an alim, a mufti? No. They just thought Shaykh. Right? But not, Shaykhs are not all of the same caliber, of the same specialization. So if you don't know, they trusted you. You just filling as the khatib. Right? The Imam slipped down the stairs, broke his neck. So you stepped in to give the khutbah. So they put a jubba around you. Someone comes, asks you for a fatwa, if you felt kind of embarrassed. You say, might as well. Seems this way. You have the sin of that action, right? So be careful. And that's one of the ways people, not everybody who gets into positions of leadership, right? It's called leadership by mediocrity, right? That you're just the last person standing, right? So you're just there, nobody else to give the khutbah, you gave a khutbah. You said a few interesting things, you gave a khutbah again. From giving khutbah, they said, could you give one of the monthly circles? You gave monthly circles, then they said, can you join the weekly circle? Suddenly you got your own dars, and said it's just a discussion circle, then you started teaching a book. From teaching a book, now you start teaching fiqh. From teaching fiqh, people ask you for religious answers. But in all of it, your own knowledge is the same as it was when you're the random uncle or auntie in the auntie scenario who doesn't know anything. Well, I'm learning as I'm going along. No, that's in Arabic, that's called takhbis. That's called mucking up. Right? The Prophet warned about that. And if someone advises another in a matter where you know that the benefit is in the contrary, one has deceived them. Right? So, and this happens in transactions actively, right? So, for example, if someone comes to your store, right? You got a small bookstore, and you've not made a lot of sales today, and a talib ilm comes, right? And they say, what's a good Arabic dictionary? So you look at your shelf and you're like, oh my God, I haven't sold Lisan al-Arab yet. And you know, Lisan al-Arab, which is, let's say, 30 volumes, that'll sell for $200. That, I need the liquidity. Now, for the student of knowledge, do they need Lisan al-Arab? No, not till much further ahead in their seeking of knowledge. So they're not come. So when someone's buying something from you, right? They're coming as a buyer, but what else are they coming when they ask you a question and you're the seller? Right? Al-mustasharu mu'taman. Right? The one trusted, the one consulted has been trusted. But also the second part of the hadith, the third part of the hadith, whoever indicates something to their brother when they know that the other person's good is in something else has cheated them. Right? So if you want to sell your copy of Lisan al-Arab to the student of knowledge, you should say, look, I have a few dictionaries and I also have Lisan al-Arab for this much. This is what I have. So you have to be clear that you're not giving them advice. So see what you want to buy. But if you give them advice or give them a misimpression that this is good for you to get that, then it's kind of indirect cheating. Now, they're also responsible. They bought it willfully. That's their fault. But you are morally culpable. They spent that money on that. Then that month, they couldn't pay their rent because you convinced them to buy a big book, whatever. That's a type of deception, right? And of course, we're using religious examples. Same things apply in other things, right? There is a wealthy-looking old couple who comes to your phone store and they say, we don't use technology a lot, and we don't like all this technology, and I think it affects my pacemaker and this and that. So what's a basic phone to get? And you look at their shoes, because shoes usually tell you how well off someone is, or very often. So they got expensive shoes. You were thinking of buying those shoes, but they're $400 shoes. Like, whoa. You see, see elderly auntie, she's wearing some really fancy, expensive shoes too. So you're like, well, we have these phones. It's called the iPhone 12 Max Pro, whatever. You can get it for $50 a month. That's a good deal. Now, they didn't need the fancy phone, right? Now, buyers need to learn the akhlaq of the tujjar. People in trade, because that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, "At-tujjar humul fujjar." Traders are the most vile of the corrupt, because they do this day in, day out. They lie, cheat, deceive, give false impressions, and don't have nasiha. Whereas the quality of nush, of goodwill to the other, the basic goodwill is take care of the rights of the other. Right? Or don't advise them. Right? And it requires sensitivity. So, of course, when someone gives you wrong advice, this also stirs anger. Right? So it goes back to anger. Right? Someone gave you wrong advice, you have a right for restitution. You don't have a right to bludgeon them, right? Like, you don't have a right to wrong them. وَمِنْهُ, and of the other things that stir anger, خُلْفُ الْوَعْدِ, is breaking of promises. So, don't break promises, because it gets other people upset. And if a promise is broken, then for you, then respond by the standards of the Sharia. Overlooking is recommended. Seeking your right is your right. But wronging the other person outside of rightfully seeking your right is jungle law. It's not what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has come with. Right? Right? And as one of the Indian scholars put it, we are Musulman, we are not hayawan. Right? We are Muslims. Right? We are people of submission to God. We are not Musulman. We are not hayawan. Right? We are not animals. The law of the jungle applies to animals. Allah has honored us with an intellect by which we submit to God according to the teachings of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So khulful wa'd, breaking promises. Right? Allah gets people upset. So indirectly, you could be party to their sin. Even though if they do wrong, they're responsible for their wrong. But the one who agitates the actions of another shares in the action to some extent. Allah. Okay. وَهُوَ الثَّالِثُ وَالْعِشْرُونَ. Right? And breaking promises is the 23rd of the blameworthy traits. وَضِدُّهُ إِنْجَازُ الْوَعْدِ. And the opposite of breaking promises is fulfilling one's promises and upholding one's promises. And Allah, قال الله تعالى, يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O you who believe, لما تقولون ما لا تفعلون. Why do you say that which you do not do? And this has multiple implications. One of them is, why do you make a promise that you do not intend to fulfill? كبر مقتا عند الله. It is odious indeed with Allah. أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون, that you say that which you do not do. Right? Then he mentioned some of the hadiths about the gravity of breaking promises. Right? So روى الإمام مسلم عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال رسول الله صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم آية المنافق ثلاث. The signs of a hypocrite are three. Right? وإن صلى وصام وزعم أنه مسلم. Right? These are three signs of a hypocrite. Even if they pray and fast and imagine that they are a true Muslim. Right? Of course, doesn't mean that this is not saying that the one who doesn't do these is a kafir, but that even if they're not an upright Muslim, they're not a Muslim who conducts themselves as a Muslim should. They're not of those pleasing to Allah. What are these? إذا حدث كذب. Right? If they speak, they lie. Now, lying, right? And we looked at lying earlier, and there'll be more coming about lying later, right? Lying there is of two types. There's an active lie where you deliberately lied. But there's also lying by, because what is lying? What is being truthful? Being truthful is to affirm what you have good reason to believe is true, right? In a simplified definition, right? You can see the definitions of the ulama of being truthful, of sidqul kalam, is to state that which you have a good reason to believe is true. So what is a lie? A lie, we imagine a lie, oh, that's terrible. No, a lie doesn't have to be where you're active. Lying does not have to be cheating, deception, treachery, harmful in its consequence, etc. Lying at its core, what is it? Lying, the baseline lie is to affirm something when you do not have good reason, right? When you do not have good reason to affirm it is true. And a lot of things we say day to day are considered lies because you have to be clear as a believer. An opinion stated as a fact could count as a lie. Let's say I really like this pen. I mean, it's I like it. I'm nothing against this pen. Let's say I really like this fountain pen. But if I say, you know what? This is the best fountain pen in the world. That's a lie. It's a lie. It's not. So a basic thing is from tahdhibul lisan, refining your tongue, is distinguish between your opinion. Say, this is my favorite pen. Ahlan wa sahlan. Your favorite thing could be whatever it is. But when you state your opinion as a fact, there's khilaf about it, but you're in the danger of being a liar. And lying is very grave. It's one of the signs of a hypocrite. And a person continues to lie, said our Prophet ﷺ said that a person keeps speaking the truth, said, be truthful, for truthfulness leads to righteousness, and righteousness leads to heaven. فإن الصدق يهدي إلى البر وإن البر لا يهدي إلى الجنة. And he said, beware of lying, For lying leads to corruption, and corruption leads to hellfire. And the Prophet ﷺ said about one may say things you don't consider to be of consequence, but they immerse you in hell because it builds up momentum. It starts with the petty things, but it's all from not being careful about your words. It's a very practical, important distinction between opinions. Make your opinions clear, and when you state something, be very careful. But even with opinions, ulama said be careful because your opinion could be taken as a fact by someone else. Right? Let's say you got, so the ulama would be very careful. You got fancy headphones as a gift. So he said, what headphones do you like? He said, well, I like these. Someone trusts you, they bought very expensive headphones that are expensive for them. So the ulama would be very careful of not stating their opinion where their opinion would be taken as a fact, lest they be followed in it and the person harm themselves. That's why one of my teachers, subhanAllah, he's at Zaytuna now, Shaykh Talal. Once we had a class, and I'd asked him about a particular matter and he'd answered. And the class used to be at my house when Imam and I were living at the University of Toronto's married students' residence. So someone in the class, a few days after I asked the question, one of the younger students asked the question, and Shaykh said, I don't know. So I would read the text, and Shaykh, so it was a long room, right? I mean, a small room, but there'll be 20 people in just a small, one room, one living room apartment. So 20 people sitting there. I'm sitting just facing Shaykh Talal. So I've got the book in my hand, the Maqasid of Imam Nawawi. It used to be Shafi'i back then. So I looked at him like, he said, read. Read. So I was like, then afterwards, he was actually driving me to Masagid Sayyidi, to my parents' house. So Sayyidi, I asked you the question, you answered. He said, I don't know the implications of that for these other people. So I don't know everything about it. It's okay. So what are the implications for other people? So I don't know this. So okay. Right? I thought it was a cop-out initially, right? But that's wisdom. Right? So people asking lots of questions, the nagging of questioning oneself is certainly something of a distraction. Consult people. That's a simple thing, right? Consult people. Worthy of consulting. Sometimes one can see things as a bundle of problems. You go with someone with experience, but go with the intention. Be careful about whom to consult and go. And one of the simple things is just listen to them because they have experience. It can seem complicated, but they've dealt with it many times. But then the challenge is, if they give you a prescription, apply it. Simplify. Embrace consultation. But of course, the right people. Because wrong consultation is like taking poison. That's, if they speak, they lie. Right? Be very careful because many things can be considered lies. You had a really nice you got food from a really nice Iraqi restaurant. It was pretty good, right? So you say, that's the best Iraqi restaurant in town. Now, if you read some reviews, even then, even if other people said it's the best restaurant, it's more cautious to say, according to Mississauga Halal, such and such is the best Iraqi restaurant in town. That's caution. Or say, my favorite Iraqi restaurant is such and such. An opinion is yours. It's neither truthful nor lying, but even opinions, be careful. But when you state something, or And also avoid exaggeration. Instead of saying it's the best, just say it's a good restaurant. Safer. Tone it down. Right? Right? They say al-mubalagha babul kadhib. Right? Exaggeration is a door of lying. That's why Shakespeare, when he described his beloved, what did he say? And of course, there's places where you can exaggerate. Poetry, certain types of praise. He says, my beloved's eyes are nothing like the sun. Right? But we say our beloved is more beautiful than the sun, right? Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. If they speak, they lie. وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ. The second sign of the hypocrite is if they promise, they break their promise. وَإِذَا تُمِنَ خَانَ. And if they're trusted, they break their trust. Right? Now, legally, lying promising has two components. Making a promise and then fulfilling the promise. Right? A promise is different from a contract. Right? A contract is binding on both parties, right? A covenant, etc. is binding. Omar, if you can just keep track of the question. If there's a relevant question, ask now. We'll take the rest after. Okay. So a contract is binding, but a promise, right? A promise has two components. Making the promise and then fulfilling the promise. The promise is in itself not in exchange for anything. It's in itself. You say, I'll help you move tomorrow. It's not a contract, right? You didn't enter into a contract of hire. They're not paying you. There's no consideration. It's just you gave a word, right? But you're not getting something in return for it materially. So a promise has two components. There's making the promise and fulfilling the promise. Making the promise is what requires the utmost of caution, in that it is haram to make a promise unless, or it's impermissible to make a promise unless two conditions are fulfilled. Which are, right? Right? Which are, number one, al-azm ala al-wafa. You have the resolve to fulfill. And the second is, you are reasonably sure, غلبة الظن على al-wafa. You're reasonably sure that you'll be able to fulfill the promise. Right? So it's impermissible to make a promise unless these two are found. You have the resolve to fulfill the promise, and you're reasonably sure you'll be able to do so. So your friend is moving next Saturday. Say, I'll be there. Right? So don't make the promise unless two conditions. One, you have the resolve. I will fulfill this promise within oneself. But number two, you consider, will you be in fact able to fulfill the promise? So it turns out Saturday, you're speaking at, you have a family function. You won't be able to help your friend move. So there, say, let me check, and check before you make your promise. This applies to a promise. It applies even more strongly to a contract, a commitment, etc. that you get into. Right? Okay. So the hadith of breaking the promise is when you make the promise without the commitment to fulfill it. Once you've made a promise properly, then it is the sunnah to fulfill it, even if difficult. But circumstances can change, right? So it's not obligatory to fulfill the promise, but it's makruh to break it unless there's genuine need. And if you keep breaking promises, it means that you're almost certainly not fulfilling the initial condition to begin with. Okay. And وروى البخاري ومسلم عن ابن عمر عن عمرو بن العاص رضي الله تعالى عنهما أنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أربع من كان فيه كان منافقا خالصا. The Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم said, whoever has four qualities is a pure hypocrite. نسأل الله العافية. ومن كان فيه خصلة منهن كان فيه خصلة من النفاق حتى يدعها. And whoever has any one of these traits has one of the traits of hypocrisy until they leave that trait. And of course, this, like many hadiths, points to the fact that traits of character can be changed. That's just the way I am is not how we view. We do view that there's tab'a, but there's also tatabbu', right? There is our nature, but there's also our, what we can change the way we are, but it requires effort. So what are the four signs of hypocrisy in this hadith? إِذَا اؤْتُمِنَ خَانَ. If they're trusted, they break their trust. وَإِذَا حَدَّثَ كَذَبَ. And if they speak, they lie. وَإِذَا عَاهَدَ غَدَرَ. And if they make a covenant, they betray it. And we looked at Ghadr last week. وَإِذَا خَاصَمَ فَجَرَ. And if they dispute, they act in a vile manner. Right? Whether vile in a manner that is, dishonest and treacherous in that way, vile in establishing falsehood when they know it's false, or by their conduct being vile. So then, Imam al-Birgivi rahimahullah says, فَالْوَعْدُ بِنِيَّةِ الْخُلْفِ كَذِبٌ عَمْدٌ حَرَامٌ. So making a promise with the intention of not fulfilling it is considered a lie that is deliberate and impermissible. Right? Right? وَأَمَّا بِنِيَّةِ الْوَفَاء فَجَائِزٌ. Right? As for breaking the promise, even though you made the promise with the intention of fulfilling it, as we described, it is permissible. Right? أما بنية الوفاء فجائز. As for making a promise with the intention of fulfilling it, is permitted to make the promise. Rather, it could be recommended. You promise you'll go help, and you have the intention of fulfilling it. It is permissible to make a promise, right? And it's praiseworthy because you bring happiness to their heart. You assisting others. It's ta'awun ala al-khair, etc. But take promises seriously. ثم إنه لا يجب عند أكثر العلماء رحمه الله تعالى. However, fulfilling the promise after it's soundly made is not obligatory according to most of the ulama. May Allah be well pleased with him. Right? بل يستحب فيكون خلفه مكروها تنزيها. But once a promise is soundly made, it is recommended to fulfill. So breaking the promise is somewhat disliked. That's the position of the vast majority of the scholars. Right? And the commentator quotes Imam Badruddin al-Aini from Sharh Sahih al-Bukhari regarding this. Right? 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 And it's best to make a promise, says Imam al-Aini in his commentary on Bukhari, by putting it by saying God willing, so that one doesn't appear to be a liar. But just saying inshallah is not enough on its own. If fulfilling the promise would have resultant harm, it is recommended to break the promise. Right? So you promise to be a witness at your friend's wedding, but then you realize, oh my God, he's not asked his parents. And there's harm involved. So it's recommended for you to break the promise. Right? Right? And of the evidences that it's not obligatory to fulfill a promise in general is, he says, بِدَلِيلِ قَوْلِهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم إِذَا وَعَدَ الرَّجُلُ وَنَوَى أَنْ يَفِيَ فَلَمْ يَفِي بِهِ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِ وَفِي رِوَايَةٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that if a person makes a promise to another intending to fulfill it, but then doesn't fulfill it due to some excuse, for example, then there's no harm in that. لا جناح عليه. And another narration, فلا إثم عليه. Another narration of the hadith, there's no sin upon them. But both indicate that it indicates that it would be generally better to fulfill. Right? Right? Now, there is a khilaf, right, with some of the fuqaha who said that a promise that results in another making a material undertaking directly conditional upon the promise, such a wa'd is religiously obligatory to fulfill. And that's the fatwa in our times, according to many of the ulama. Right? And even the Majalla has an item related to this, right? الوعد الذي يترتب عليه التزام مالي مشروط منبني على الوعد. A promise upon which a financial undertaking is directly based by the other party is obligatory to fulfill. So, for example, I go to Faridi Nan House in Mississauga, and I say, Uncle Faridi, if you make me 500 naans on Friday morning, I'll pick them up for you, and so Uncle makes 500 naans based on my, and then I say, you know what, I decide I won't get it. That would be sinful because my action resulted in another directly undertaking a financial commitment. But it's better for the other party not to accept that. Make a contract. It's much better. Right? So this last hadith, he says, رواه الترمذي وأبو داود عن زيد بن أرقم. This hadith was related by Tirmidhi and Abu Dawud from Zayd bin Arqam. وعند الإمام أحمد ومن تبعه الوفاء واجب والخلف حرام مطلقا. Right? And according to Imam Ahmad and those who followed him, fulfilling a promise is wajib and breaking it without excuse is impermissible. ففيه شبهة الخلاف. So this matter has the shubha of it being differed upon. وآية النفاق. Right? And the verse of hypocrisy, right? would make the God-fearing believer be particularly careful. وَشَأْنُ السَّالِكِ الْاجْتِنَابُ مِنَ الْخِلَافِ. And the way of the one trying to travel the path of the pleasure of Allah is to keep away from matters where there is difference of opinion. Right? Right? So of course, avoiding the difference of opinion is recommended, not obligatory. Right? Right? So this is insofar as taqwa. Right? So in terms of fatwa, a person just has to stick to follow one sound opinion. If they're sticking to their madhab, you stick to your madhab, you fulfilled your duty. But taqwa is to avoid difference. Mid-level taqwa. Right? The first, how does taqwa begin? The legal operationalization of taqwa is first leave the haram, then leave the makruh in your madhab, then leave the makruh, then leave the haram and the makruh in another madhab. And that's why the ulama would learn about khilaf not to go down to the easiest possible ruling, but to do what's more scrupulous. But you can't get there. First, act on one madhab, do its duties. And most of the senior scholars I know from Sham have studied at least two madhabs. They would identify as one and be staunch in following that madhab. But most of the Hanafi teachers I know have studied at least two, if not three books minimum in Shafi'i fiqh. Some of them have also studied Hanbali fiqh. Okay. The Maliki school is somewhat less prevalent in Damascus, or significantly less, but they would have studied multiple madhabs. Why? Sometimes it's needed for fatwa, but for their own practice, to avoid the khilaf. Right? وَشَأْنُ السَّالِكِ, the way of the one traveling the path of Allah, is avoiding khilaf, وَالْأَخْذُ بِالْوِفَاقِ, and to take what is agreed upon. Right? And there's some good discussions, right? And seeking out dispensations, right? But that's the way of caution. And there's some precious discussions here, right? Okay. That's why some of the fuqaha criticized the Sufis for being too strict when it came to the Sharia, making things too difficult for themselves or for others, right? But that's the way of the true people of the spiritual path, right? They're ahlul azaim, right? They're the people of high resolve. They hold themselves to high resolve, and those who came to them seeking spiritual guidance, they'd point them towards caution. And we'll continue seeing other things that stir anger, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But we'll stop here for today. وفي هذا القدر الكفاية لمن أدركته العناية, as they say. This extend their sufficiency for those who are seeking benefit. So we saw here some of the things that stir anger in others. You made a promise, you didn't fulfill it. But if someone doesn't fulfill a promise, you don't have a right to backbite them, tailbearing. That is law of jungle behavior. And don't be jungly. Don't be like you're someone out of the jungle. Be a Muslim. Be someone who submits to the command of God when tested. Any questions here? What's this question? There's a question here. Okay, so there's a question about you don't ask information from others when questioning that of the divine. Sometimes even your own thoughts get in the way of being on the path. No, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ, ask the people of remembrance if you know not. Right? And rather, the sunnah, and people are free to pursue what they wish, but the sunnah is to consult living scholars, to consult the experienced, the wise, the experts. And this notion, I'll figure it all out myself, is detrimental. It's not from strength, it's from weakness. Right? That's certainly not the way the Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba, etc. They would consult one another, and they would consult the Prophet ﷺ, and even about the most shameful of things that we would consider shameful. What should one do about people who presumably, out of fear of speaking without knowledge, do not speak to benefit others in spite of the ability to do so? That's weakness. Right? Safety is to be under the ittabi' sabila man anaba ilay. Follow the path of those who have turned to me. Right? It's very difficult if you're self-directed to maintain rightful balance. La ifrat wa la tafrit. Without excessiveness, without being hasty, and not tafrit, and not being lax. And from laxity is not fulfilling responsibility when responsibility must be fulfilled. So I'm not worthy. It's not about whether you're worthy or not. It's what are you responsible for? And how do you fulfill your responsibility? I'm not sincere enough. There's a responsibility. Fulfill it and strive to be sincere. Consult. Shawirhum fil amr, because there's a responsibility to fulfill. And if you're not fulfilling it, and you're not consulting about how to fulfill it remaining unfulfilled because you're just moaning and groaning is not from being a believer. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Where is that in your life? Right? So, well, I don't know if I'm ready. Well, okay, good. You don't know. But if there's something that needs to be fulfilled, right? Like if someone's about to die on the street and you don't know how to get them to the hospital, do you just say, I'm sorry, sir, I don't know how to get you to the hospital. I'll let you die here. Assalamu alaikum. No, you ask, how do we help? How do you take this person to the hospital? And say order a cab. Oh, yeah. And so people tell you. Similarly, about religious responsibilities or other responsibilities. You realize that there's something at hand. At my high school, they give terrible khutbah. At my workplace, the khutbahs are, nobody's giving the khutbah. So we're not holding prayer, even though we're all at work. So what do we do? So I'm not ready. I said, no, it may be obligatory for you. Right, so what do? Consult. Simple as that. Consult. That what do I do? But the believer looks at, what am I responsible for here? How do I fulfill my responsibility? And when it's not clear, consult. That's a very straightforward decision-making framework. Right? Yeah, and if people who are worried about speaking on knowledge, sometimes we encourage them, sometimes we raise the affair to people who know better. Right? And they can advise us on how to handle these kinds of things. Okay, so we'll stop there today. Barakallahu ta'ala bikum wa fikum. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.